Hello friends, welcome to the channel. In today's video, we are going to be ranking my eyeshadow palettes. Now I have them all here. Got a big stack of them. And I'm going to be ranking them from my least favorite to my most favorite. Pretty similarly to how I did my blush ranking video. If you haven't seen that, I will link it in the cards. This was actually way easier than ranking the blushes. I felt so confident about all of my choices. Now, before we get into it, I wore my hair like this in my last video, and just about every comment was about how much y'all liked my hair. And honestly, I was so happy about it because I was feeling my hair in that video, and I discovered this hairstyle back in 2019, and I haven't been able to wear it basically since I cut my hair in 2019. And this was the first time in like 3 years, and I was feeling it in that video. Oh my gosh. And y'all were too. So I wore it again today. It's a different day, and I'm just like living my best ballerina bun life over here, and I love it. I also want to say before we start, this is the first video that I'm filming since June 1st, and I would like to say Happy Pride. Happy Pride Month, friends. It's June, it's Pride Month. I'm here, you're here, and I'm so happy to celebrate it with y'all. So let's get into it. We're gonna kick it off, and I have 13 palettes. What played into my ranking is, what would I, if I could only keep one palette, what would I be, or what would I keep? And I didn't necessarily extend it from there, because then, if you could only keep one palette, and then if you could only keep two palettes, you might want something to balance out what you don't have in the first. But I was kind of thinking about it in isolation, like if I could only keep one palette, or can I only keep this palette? So the top two at least are two palettes that I could see myself owning just those for a year, 2 years, 3 years, and really loving. And then there's also some seasonality that factors into some of these choices, as well as what I think is a unique color story. And then also, would I declutter it? So let's get to number 13. I don't think this is going to come as a surprise if you've heard me talk about this palette before. And that is the Retro palette. Here she is. I like it, but I don't love it. I have seriously thought about decluttering this on several occasions. And actually, after I filmed this video, or this video reminded me that I want to rearrange the color story to see if that plays a role in here. And this is the next one as well. These two are the only two that I've actually seriously considered decluttering since the start of the year. This is not the case of a bad formula. This was just the case of a bad buy, in my opinion. I like these colors, but I don't love them. And if you've seen the way that I do my makeup, I don't really do a lot of dark colors. I don't wear a lot of dark colors. Even when I build stuff out in the crease, it's not a lot of dark colors. And today, here's like one of the more bolder eye looks that I would do. I love a one shadow look. For my skin tone, this palette is like a mid-tone to dark palette. Like, there's very few truly light shades in here, and even some of the shimmers, they're in more of that mid-tone range. So this is number 13, and I don't really think I could stress this enough, how much this is more of this is more of like a color thing than a formula thing. So number 12 is the Elsa palette, or the Frozen 2 Elsa palette. Here it is. The biggest reason why it's down here in the bottom is largely the color story. This really feels like a winter palette to me. I mean, you have the packaging, but also just the colors. And then you have that blue, which feels pretty wintry. And then you also have this pressed glitter, which I have never used. Look at how chunky that is. I don't really know like what I would do with it. I wouldn't really put this on my eyes. Maybe actually, if you've seen the Low by Bingo update, or that we're setting the bingo board, this could actually be a good palette to try, like to use this pressed glitter, because I don't. I don't wear them, so try to find a way to make it work. So there is formula in here that I don't like, but there are colors in here that I do like. And what I think ends up happening is that because I don't love every color, I gravitate towards the same few. And I'm not super adventurous with this palette. This shade up here, I swatched these two. So this is the white shade, and it's kind of chalky, honestly. And then this purple, it's nicer, but I don't really wear that kind of thing. This red swatches out as kind of hot pink. So it's, in terms of formula, this one is a worse formula than the Natasha Denona. It's not as good. But one of the things I do love about it and why I haven't decluttered it is that I really do get that wintry color story that I really do like having in the wintertime to diversify my eyeshadows, but then also really get into a season. Okay, number 11. This one surprised me because last time I did a ranking kind of video, this made it basically near the top. And this is the Sweet Talk palette. I've owned this for a few years. One of the shadows has popped out, so I'm just a little bit nervous about showing this now. Here it is. I like this color story again, but I don't love it. I like it more than the Frozen 2 palette, but again, I like this color story more than the Frozen 2 palette, but it's in the bottom for similar reasons. It has a pressed glitter, this one right here. This particular metallic is kind of hard. No, this is a glitter as well, and it's super chunky. So there's two pressed glitters in here. Here it is. That gold. I could try wearing this palette. It's pressed glitter for Low Eye Bingos I mentioned for Frozen 2. I like the colors a little bit more than the Frozen 2 palette. It is just over the 3 or 4 years I've had this, my color preferences have changed a little bit, just a little bit. I do tend to like cooler tones. I mean, I still will go for a warm tone, but when it comes to warm tones, the peachiness of warm tones is one that I think I've swayed. My opinion on it has changed. I'm not as much in love with the peachy tones as I once was. Like this one, and then, you know, this guy here as well. And then this one up here is a shimmer that I've never used. So there's actually quite a few shades in this palette that I don't reach for. The shimmer is a little dark for my taste. There it is, but it's really beautiful. It's just a little too dark for me, or for my preferences. So this is a good, not great, and a color story that just doesn't, you know, go all year round. But not all of our palettes actually have to do that. Not all of our palettes need to be wearable all year round. And there is joy really in getting that seasonal palette. All right, next up is the e.l.f. Bite Size Quad in Cream and Sugar. This is a good formula. This is a good palette. Other than, I mean, for the last two palettes, I had formula issues and colors that I didn't wear. This is a really great formula. I like all the colors. The only reason it's down here is because it's just 4 shades. This is kind of what I like about the ranking video, is that we buy palettes for different reasons. Not every palette has to be a standalone, or not every palette has to be wearable all year round. This one's a quad, which is why it's down here, because I typically like a little bit more selection than 4, but I bought a quad for a reason. So I think that this absolutely has a place in my makeup collection, you know, in my eyeshadow palette collection, but I don't think it'll be a tippy top favorite just because it's 4, even though I was looking for a quad when I bought it. You see what I mean? Number 9 is the Cinnamon Swirl palette. This one, here we go, is down here largely in part because this is probably my least used palette, or I'm the least familiar with this because it was a gift that I got in February, and I've been doing eyeshadow roulettes and things like that, so I haven't been reaching for just any palette out there. I have used it just, you know, alone twice, and I haven't had any qualms about it or its formula. This color here, I'm Toasted, is in my current makeup or eyeshadow roulette. Just a great formula, and I actually wore it as an outer corner shade in a recent video. And it swatches really nicely. So this one is just more of a lack of experience thing, and then there are some colors in here that I just don't wear a ton because of my preferences. I was pleasantly surprised about this formula. Next up is the Nudes of New York palette by Maybelline. This is one that has not gotten a lot of love on my channel. This one is down here simply because of color, and it's gotten lost in the shuffle really, and the formula on this is really nice. It really reminds me of Modern Renaissance. People have talked about that, and I think that one day this is going to replace Modern Renaissance for me because it has more of the things. The Modern Renaissance is not a perfect palette. It's kind of become nostalgic for me, but this one has more of the things that I like about Modern Renaissance and less of the things that I don't. And I think Modern Renaissance is kind of, that formula can be difficult to work with in my opinion. And this one is just not as powdery, and you don't get that intensity of color like you do with Modern Renaissance. Either way, this one has just gotten lost truly with everything that I've owned, and one that I've, kind of forgotten about. And so the next one up is the Dominique palette, and really these two could be interchangeable. I think I like the color story of this one more. I like the color story and formula of this one a little bit more than this one. That's why it's ranked higher, but they're both kind of lost in the shuffle. And I really think that both of these could rank higher potentially in 6 months, a year, 2 years if I just use them a little bit more. So next up is a Dominique Latte palette, and I'm not going to stay here long because I feel like I've said a lot of my feelings on this just in that little segment, or that little comparison. I really love the shimmers in here. I think they're standout shimmers. I think the formula is amazing, better than Maybelline, but I think the color choices of the shimmers are perfect, and I'm a shimmer gal. I love a, one shadow or two shadow look, with the shimmer. I love the mattes. I think the color story of the mattes great. The formula is great. I don't use the blue and the purple, but I knew that when I bought it. If anything, this one can kind of skew maybe a little bit fall time, like a fall palette, but honestly, so can this one. So it's not like that really puts one over the other. And what really, I think, puts this one over the edge is a formula. Next up is the Tartlette in Bloom palette. And this has fallen pretty far. I bought this palette in 2019, which as far as the lifespan of this palette is pretty late. Everybody was kind of over it by the time that I bought it. So I think that is interesting. And I really, really loved it. It was like a top 3 palette for me for the first, at least like for 2019 and for 2020. And this has just fallen a little bit because the formulas on some of the shimmers are just okay. And I tend to reach for this shimmer the most. Like I've kind of come to fall into like a couple of shades, or not a couple, a handful of shades. And I don't use every color in this palette, but it's also a really super neutral, it's a cool tone neutral palette. And this one I have not reached for in basically the last year. I'm sure there have been times where I've, gone for a shade or something, but I really have no memory of using this in the last year. It's fallen a little bit because one, it's older in my collection, but also the formula isn't as good as some of the other formulas that I have out here. Like I think Natasha Denona is a superior formula. Even some of the Colourpop palettes I have are a better formula. Like their metallics are just overall better. And as far as like for me, in terms of one shadow looks, there's only one in here that I would use. There's only 2 shimmers in here. Okay, there's technically 3 shimmers, but I haven't used the third. It's like a gray color. This is it. I don't think I've ever swatched this. Okay, we're discovering new things. This is not what I expected. Here's the color. Right up here. Does that not look gray to you? Here's the swatch. It's like a brown. It's not at all how I expected. Wow. Wow. That's really beautiful. Okay. Anyways, this is a neutral palette, and the formula and the particular color choices in here, they are nice. They're just other things that I think that are built in the same way, like a truly neutral palette, a cool tone neutral palette that is kind of the same thing but better, more shades, that like I don't think you need both because they're kind of repetitive, if you feel me. So for this one, this is actually a bit of a funny palette because these shades are truly right up my alley. These are shades that I do really like. What I think maybe tips it over the edge for, that's probably not the right word. What brings it to the middle for me is that there's only half the palette that I've used regularly. There's 7 shades out of the 12 that I would, no, there's 6 shades out of the 12, half the palette that I would dip in and go for regularly, and just one shimmer. It's my fault for not swatching that other one. Whereas when I look at the Natasha and Denona palette, which I think is a pretty close comparison because they're both made to be cool tone neutral palettes, Natasha and Denona's formula is better. The colors are more up my alley. There's more shimmers, more one shadow look. So it caters a little bit more to my preferences. As of right now anyways. So we're kind of at the halfway mark. We have our top 6 palettes. And if you know my palette collection, if you happen to know about it, I would like to know what you think is in the top, what these top 6 are, what you think my top 1, 2, or 3 might be. Number 6. No, this is top 5, y'all. This is top 5. So, number 5, you guessed it, maybe? I don't know. Modern Renaissance. This is my most used, most long loved palette. It's my oldest palette that I own. Bought this as soon as it came out, and I actually remember trying to find these. I was going to all these different stores trying to find it. I went to multiple locations to try and get this palette. It was sold out online. I even, like, my boyfriend was driving, he was helping me find the palette. It was quite an adventure. This one has honestly become a nostalgic palette for me, and I don't think I have it in my heart to declutter it. I'm not there yet with it. I really like this color story even now. The reason why it's here and not higher, I mean, it's a miracle that it's even this high, but I think this is the palette that I know the best. I know the formulas, I know the colors the best. This is my most worn palette, so it's here. But it only has 2 shimmers. The formula is pretty, it has a lot of pickup, which I don't mind because you can tap off the brush, but also the formula, which I think goes along with that, is that it's so pigmented and you have to be just really careful working with it because you can pick up so much like really quick, especially with the dark colors. Using the dark colors does kind of, even now, not intimidate me, but I'm so careful and I almost don't want to use them because you really have to blend them out. Like you really have to take your time with them. At least me, like I'm not a makeup artist. So the formula is a little bit too strong, too powerful for me and my tastes. And it's a warm tone neutral, which was my favorite kind of palette to work with, you know, at one time. But now I love a cool tone palette. Those are what are my favorites. Number 4 is the 3CE palette. It's the Overtake palette. I have really, in the past 2 months, have come to really love this. And I believe this is a Korean, yes, it's a Korean makeup brand, and it's my first encounter with this brand, and it's so good that I would absolutely buy another palette from this brand. I think the formula of everything is top notch. There is not a dud shade in here, and I like every single shade in here. My favorite 2 shades, which I think you can see with the usage, are these 2 shades. I think the shimmer is outstanding. Even colors like this, there's a lot of palettes where you'd get a color like this and the shimmer would be hard to work with, hard to blend, but this is not the case. Just look at that and we'll do a little look at it. I think if you look at these 2, this is the color from the Too Faced palette. To me, this is like a more sophisticated version, a more wearable version, but just for my tastes. It's a little bit newer in my collection. I got this last year, pretty early in the year, but for a while I actually was, you know, not in favor of this palette. I loved it at once and then I kind of turned against it, or my feelings turned, and now I'm back loving it. really, really love this palette and love this color story. It's kind of an interesting color story actually, because it's warm tone, but it's like, what are you, mauve? Are you red? It's kind of like a reddish mauve-y palette. Really like that one. Number 3, we're getting into the top 3. This one This one surprised me as to how high up it is, and it might surprise you too. This is the Nars Orgasm palette. Here she is. This is the most unique color story that I own in my collection. And if I'm being honest, then maybe this one should rank higher. This one probably should be the number 3 because I've worn this more, I'm more familiar with the palette, and there's no dead color in here. This one I've worn this less. It is newer, but I haven't reached for it as much. This one really feels like a winter palette. Like it's kind of grungy, which is a little unexpected for Nars. The green doesn't work. I mean, the green's okay. The green is like, it's not a dud, it's workable, but I do have a video trying to make this work and it was a bit of a challenge. I don't wear greens a ton, but their shimmers are so buttery, so amazing. Here's the green shimmer. Do a little swatchy on this hand. Look at that. I think it's amazing. This is a color story where even just looking at it, even if I don't use it, just looking at it inspires me to play with new things, try new looks, and all of the shades but the green are amazing. The shimmers are amazing. Some of the best shimmers that I own, period. And the mattes are so, like, they're so wildly smooth. I can't, it's the kind of feeling that gives me a chill actually. Anyways, love that palette. All right, number 2. This was so hard. Oh my god. I'm now doubting myself. I'm now doubting my choices. Okay. I can't. Okay, here's what's hard about this. In what I've presently ranked as my number 1 palette, I like the mattes more. No, that's not true. Okay, I'll say I like the color of the mattes more because they're more in that purpley mauve family, which I've been obsessed with it for the past 2 years. Whereas I think the number 2 palette that I've currently ranked, the shimmer formula is a superior formula and there is more diversity in that color. And I like the colors of the shimmers more. God damn it. Okay. I think I'm switching my opinion. I think I am. So number 1 that I have now demoted to number 2 is the Colourpop Flutter palette. As a color story, this is my favorite. This is my favorite color story. I love these mauves. I love this color story. I love the mauves in here so much. I think they're so beautiful. I just love the mauve tones. And when I was talking about the mattes, I don't think that these are a superior quality matte formula. I just like the colors more. I like the mauve tones more. And I like the shimmers in the other palette better because these ones are all purple, which I mean does go with the palette. But because you do have these, you know, these cooler tones, you could put a gold with this. You know, you could put a champagne with this. You could put a silver with this. And that's not really what this palette offers you. So I think this is fair to put this at number 2, although that's a really hard decision for me to make. So now the new number 1 is Natasha Denona Glam. Did you see this coming? I knew it was going to be high up there, but I don't know if I knew it would be number 1. So as I was saying, you have more variation in the shimmers. It's a great shimmer formula. It really is. And I could do one shadow looks with these particular colors, and I have. You also have darker shimmers that you can do to make a whole shimmery look. You don't really have the same options in the Flutter palette, and you do also have a pressed glitter. I mean, you could really put this one in the outer corner as an outer corner shimmer instead of a matte. But these two here are mattes with flecks of shimmer, which is still not a shimmer. But I really do like those kinds of tones because I really think it offers something special in the look. And then these ones, you just have these very particular cool tone mattes. You have 5. One is verging on a gray, which I could do without, honestly. So the tones of these shimmers, they do go with the palette, but I don't like the tones of the mattes as much as I like the Flutter by mattes. So these, I could truly I could live with just these 2 palettes. If I had to pick a third, I would probably not pick the Nars because it's also cool tone. I would probably pick the 3CE. So this kind of gives me reassurance that this would be the third and this would be the fourth. I don't think that I would pick Modern Renaissance to, be my third palette, although I love it. This was so much fun. This was not as painstaking as the blush ranking. I had a lot of fun doing this. I hope you had fun watching. Let me know what you thought about this ranking. Were you surprised by anything? And also, if you own these palettes, would you put them in similar spots as me? I'd love to hear your thoughts about eyeshadow ranking, how I did these palettes. I want to hear it all in the comments down below. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today, and I hope to see you again around here soon. Bye.